Suhit, how are we?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. Aside from traffic, which we both just experienced.
Yes, it's not great, the Edinburgh traffic.
Anyone coming to Edinburgh, don't, would be my recommendation at the moment. Give it a couple of months before the council sort themselves out, but it might end up being years. So to preface today's conversation, I think the most important question off the bat is, how do you define success?
Wow, big question right off the start. I didn't actually really know what the conversation was going to be about, so it's good to get into this. I think success is a very personal thing, different. I think I've battled a lot with what success is over my journey, because there was a part of me when I was younger that thought success was be this big person with status, a lot of money, a lot of wealth, very conventional route. But then I've had sort of like points of reflection where I've realized, does that all really matter? You know, does this matter? Does it not? And I've not really decided what success is, but I think it is a very personal thing because everyone has a different scenario. Like some person can be very philanthropic, and if they have, you know, achieved X, Y, Z charitable amounts, that's success for them. If some person has become a billionaire, that's success for them. It depends on what you personally define it to, but as long as you're pushing towards something that is, I guess, greater than what you are and continually like improving, I think that's kind of like success, but it's personal.
I entirely agree. What does it mean to you personally?
Oh, for me personally, okay, I don't know whether that was the question. I thought you meant in general.
No, I'm not letting you get away from that. Don't try and run away from the question.
I mean,
you
I
make a
think,
great politician.
Yeah, I don't think I've fully worked it out yet. I have like this idea of like, you know, kind of, you know, I want to get to X status, X wealth, do X amount, but it's changed a lot. I think for me, like, as long as I achieve the purpose that I have at the moment, which is for me, I've wanted to use my story to inspire other people to take action and follow their dreams, whether that's entrepreneurial or whether that's in whatever sort of facet of life it is. As long as I can achieve that, I think that's successful. Obviously, there is a monetary too. You know, I want to, you know, be successful monetary, you know, have multi-million net worth at some point eventually. I do want to start a cancer foundation in the future. Have some level of like following, you know, I just kind of like look at Stephen Bartlett, for example, and idolize that. Maybe a bit lower than that because I think it comes with a lot of problems for him that he talks about openly. But I've not fully defined the exact, this is what success is going to be for me, because it's changed. It keeps changing.
So that obviously comes from, there's nature nurture is the question here. And I think your background brings up a lot of questions, a lot of unique characteristics that have made you the person that you are today. So do you want to just talk us through your upbringing, your parents, and the mindset that was instilled in you from a young age?
Yeah, so I come from Indian family, South Asian family. My parents both moved to Scotland, and me and my brother were both born in Scotland. So I've been born and raised in Glasgow all my life, but very traditional sort of Indian parents, where it's like, do well in school, get good grades, do well in uni, and then get a good job. And fundamentally, it was always like, you have to be better than everyone else. We want you to continually do, you know, if someone's doing this amount of work at school, you need to do this amount of work at school. If someone's getting this grade, you need to get this grade. And I think that's a very Indian culture thing.
Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that's a good way to approach?
I think it was good for me. I resented it when I was younger because I didn't understand the value of it as to like, why am I getting forced to do all this extra stuff? Why are my parents like putting me through hell? But looking back on it, I think it's a good thing. I think, again, it depends on the person really, because some people, you know, everyone's got different personalities. But for me personally, I think it was a good thing because I'm looking back at it now and it's made me, you know, it's just made me a much harder worker. And there's been times where I just haven't wanted to do stuff, but because I've had that discipline from a young age where my parents have instilled that in me of, you have to do this whether you like it or not and just get the stuff done. I think it's benefited me in the long term. So yeah.
It's fascinating because there's a huge part of that culture that is not relevant to the rest of the UK. There isn't that sort of, this is the pathway that you will follow, therefore do everything you can from this age to try and get there. And the way I view it is, yes, it instills a culture of hard working, which can only be a good thing in long term. But my fear is, to play devil's advocate, not as a criticism, but that it could essentially send children down pathways that they don't want to go down, and they might miss out on learning things about themselves, about what they're interested in, what makes them tick, what actually truly makes them fulfilled and happy. And that, in my opinion, isn't necessarily the best way to channel that hard work. So with that in mind, if you end up having kids in the future, what would your opinion be on upbringing with that in mind? Because obviously the cultural elements of your family will stick with you.
Yep.
And you've lived through it and you're in the position you are now. But what's your perspective on the good and the bad from that sort of approach.
No, I completely agree with you in the fact that because of that culture, you may be pushed down a path you don't want to, right? And it was only because I discovered this alternate path myself that I ended up going down this path. And for the early years, my parents weren't so happy with the path I was choosing. It wasn't until the sort of later years of my journey. And I completely agree with you, is that fear of a lot of people are almost like put down this one tunnel vision route and will never quite open up to the other opportunities that lie for them because they are faced down that. Yes, it will teach them that discipline, that hard work to excel in whatever they're doing, but is it the right thing and the thing that fulfills them? Probably not. So for me, with my kids, yeah, I'm definitely going to instill still that hard work, discipline. I'm being ambitious, always trying to strive to be better than other people, but I'm not going to dampen it down to you have to go to university or you have to become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, whatever the standard, I guess the stereotypical thing is. It's like, be the best, but in whatever sort of area, you think is good for you and you think you're going to, want to have as your like kind of, I guess, identity.
So you had this growing up. You obviously were always measuring yourself against classmates, and it was about 13 years old, wasn't it, where you actually started to see a bit of a light bulb in terms of monetizing your hobbies, which is not something that many, I don't know, at 13, I was thinking about the next strength level on RuneScape, not thinking about how I could monetize it. But what was it in you that made you start thinking there's a way I can turn this into cash? There's a way that this can become something more than me just enjoying playing video games with my friends? Because the joy of being responsibility free at 13 and not needing to think about finances and paying your bills is part of the joy of gaming in the first place.
Yep.
Yet you found yourself going down a slightly different path, didn't you?
Yeah, again, every time someone asks me this, everyone always thinks there was some, magic moment for me. But honestly, I tell everyone it was just accidental. Like I wasn't this really conscious 13-year-old that was like, right, I need to know and learn about finances, personal finance, money, everything. It was just, I accidentally fell upon it because I was gaming, trying to upload content to YouTube. And I think I was just in like the back end and just saw that you could make money from the content. It was like pennies. It was like, 1 or 2 pence every single month. And I was
but it was a pound sign. There was something there.
Yeah, there was something there. There was like a $0.01 or whatever, right? Not particularly great, but it was that was like, okay, if I'm doing this right now and making 1 pence, if I could just scale this up by 10x, I can make £1. If I could scale this up by 100x, I can make 100. And then I started comparing it to the viewership of creators that I watched and idolized. I was like, okay, if I'm making this, getting this many views, how much are they making potentially? And then I was like, okay, I ran the numbers. I was like, okay, if I could get to that stage, then this could actually turn into something pretty interesting. And I love doing this. Maybe I can make a career of this and I wouldn't have to worry about going down another route. I mean, I wanted to be a doctor anyway. It wasn't like I was necessarily forced into that. Probably there was some element of, that was the only thing I knew about doing it. But environmental. But like, I was very on board with that. It wasn't like I had to do it because my parents did. But then I realized I'm more passionate about gaming and online stuff. So let's try and see if I can still do what I love and then make money out of it. And if I can't, then it's fine. It doesn't really make a difference because I'm still doing what I enjoy.
I've heard you say on other podcasts that you were very grateful for the upbringing that you had and that there wasn't really much adversity to report. And I think reflecting on adversity from childhood is something that's very popular within a podcast conversation space because we can ultimately trace back a lot of the reasons why we are the way we are from things that have happened in the past. But for you found yourself going in these two very hardworking working channels. One was academic towards medicine, and then one was developing a career in esports, which was even more emerging than it is now as a sport.
Yep.
So do you want to just talk us through how those two channels were managed before it got to the point where things really started to change for you?
Yeah, so I think majority of the time I was more so focused on school, academia, heading towards that medicine, because I was 13. It was between sort of the age of 13 to 16 that I was really discovering all of this and spending more time on it. So, I mean, I was prioritizing that 100% at the end of every day, prioritizing that. As soon as I'd come home, finish homework, whatever, then I was just spending all the rest of my time just, because I would be gaming with my friends anyway. So when I was doing that, I would just be kind of maybe cutting back a little bit of that and then learning about other business opportunities online at the time. So I was mostly still focused on school, really up until I guess the age of 16, where it became a bit harder to manage because that's where I got a paid job at a company called ESL. And I was getting paid like 800 quid a month from them at the time, which was amazing for me at 16. Like no one else that I knew at my age. I was like, wow, I'm minted. And that's where it became a bit hard to manage. But I was just basically working weekends, focusing on ESL and after school. And I think I was more shifting towards the online work at this point because, I don't know, I just had this flair and enjoyment of seeing stuff happen. Like so the first time I was like working with content creators that I watched, and it was super exciting to me to be able to actually communicate with these guys and organize deals and learn about how big brands operated. So I started probably shifting more of my time towards this at that point. Not out of anything in terms of, because I knew this was the way I was going to go forward. It was just simply out of the enjoyment and passion for it. And I've always been, as I say, because my parents instilled that in me when I was younger and made me hardworking, I've always been relatively academically, I've been well academically. So I didn't really deter too much from academics. I didn't start failing anything. Nothing started happening. I was still, doing very well, even though I was focusing on this path.
And that's something that balancing at that age is unique. I mean, earning 800 quid a month at the age of 16 is unique in and of itself, but the skills that you develop along the way will have carried you forwards to the position you are now, I'm sure of it. But going back to the adversity point, I've heard you say that essentially upbringing created this environment for you to be as creatively driven in terms of what was going on alongside academia, but things took a turn, didn't they?
Yeah.
At a certain point in 2018. And do you want to just talk us through the process there and how that's ultimately underpinned what happens next?
Yeah, so as you say, I had no adversity up in my life. In my personal opinion, I had, what you would generally think is a very perfect upbringing childhood. I'm very privileged to have two parents who were doctors, earning good money, went to private school, was, never had to worry about anything really because it was all kind of there. We weren't massively wealthy, but we were very comfortable. And then, I think it's interesting because a lot of people who are in that situation then don't really, because I feel like adversity flicks a switch in you and makes you need to feel the need to find something in you to achieve more. And, I was just kind of doing these things for fun, hand in hand, and I didn't really see an awful lot coming from it. But in 2018, this is when the adversity in my life, the main adversity that I faced probably so far in my life happened. And it was during my time when I was working at ESL. So I'm in my 5th year of school. I'm balancing doing my hires, which is obviously in Scotland the most important exams to get into university. I've obviously got everything else going on, extracurriculars. I was doing sport, and balancing different things there. And then also this job at ESL, which I just started, which I was super excited about. And the idea for this was that I was going to work for them full time after I finished school. So there was a lot of exciting things ahead, a lot of projections, and I basically discovered a lump in the left-hand side of my neck in the end of 2017. It was New Year's Eve of 2017. So I thought my parents scratched my neck, felt a lump. And I brushed it off as if it was nothing because if you see here, there's a scar under there basically. And I had one when I was 4. It was benign, no problems. So I was like, okay, this is going to be the same. It'll just be some benign thing. They'll probably just remove it. Over the January month, it just kept growing and forming. And this is when things started looking a bit, worrying. Spoke to my parents, who are obviously both doctors, and my dad was like, okay, something's definitely up, let's go get you tested. And the specialist didn't really have a clue what it was at the time. So I got a few of the lumps removed from my neck, and basically in February 2018, I was given basically unfortunate news that I was going to get diagnosed with a cancer called stage 2A Hodgkin's lymphoma. So this is when I was 16 years old, literally just over 5 years ago now. And then I underwent chemotherapy, cancer treatment for this treatment from March to August 2018. And that was the big shift in my life.
How did you cope with the news? Because at that age, when you've got so much going on, it must have been difficult to comprehend something like that because it was so out of the blue, so completely shocking that I can imagine it must have been difficult to process.
At the start, it's interesting because at the start I wasn't really fazed by it. Like when I got told, so I think I'd almost like prepared myself a little bit because I've done a lot of research on potentially what it could be, and my dad was trying to reassure me that it wouldn't be any of the bad parts, which were the 2 types of cancer that could potentially have been, and there was a bunch of other things. But I think in my head I just had almost like prepared myself that if it is the worst, it's going to be the worst. And then I got called to Beatson Cancer Centre, and my dad was reassuring me again, like, don't worry, this doctor deals with other stuff. It's not just cancer. Once again, I kind of mentally prepared. I got taken in, and there's a teenage cancer specialist in there who usually comes to break the news to people that they've got this and explain the sort of support and whatnot. And once again, they tell me, and I'm pretty like calm and nonchalant about it really. And, you know, obviously my dad's pretty aggrieved in the car on the way home, but I'm just kind of sitting there quietly, just not really processing it yet. It wasn't until I went home that, so obviously it hit me the same day, but like right from the news at the start, I didn't feel anything. I went home, and as I remember this, because I was taking a shower after the thing. I think I could hear my mum outside the bathroom on the phone crying to my grandparents. And then that's when it, like, all of a sudden, all of it that all this built, like, kind of built up stuff that I hadn't processed yet, that's when it all just hit me all the one time. I just burst out in tears in the shower, and it was just like, that's when I really realized what I was going through, because I was like, this is cancer. This is possibly one of the worst things you can have. Just burst out crying in the bathroom. And I was just thinking in my head, like, why me? Like, how is this even possible? Like, what have I done? It's not hereditary. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I was 16. I'd lived a healthy lifestyle, had a very good upbringing, always eating good foods, did sport. Like, there was just didn't make any sense to me. And it was just disbelief at that point.
I can only imagine. I think it's testament to the fact that it doesn't discriminate, does it, when it comes to this sort of thing? And that's why we try and look at things so analytically when it comes to health, that I can understand why at the age you were, existing the way that you did, you were looking at things like almost like a P&L sheet in terms of, well, these have been my inputs, why is this the output? Which makes the space to be in an emotional state of mind very difficult to find yourself in. So without dwelling too much on the negativity of the experience, you've mentioned earlier that at some point you'd like to start a foundation for teenage cancer. So based on your experience with chemo and coming out the other side into remission, thankfully, what do you want to achieve with that foundation in the future based on your experience?
Yeah, I haven't got a very clear-cut idea in it, but for me, it was like, I understand for cancer specifically, cancer treatment, cancer research, it's a very expensive thing to, you know, that people have to go through. Like Teenage Cancer Trust and all of these cancer foundations, they need a lot of funding because it's something doesn't come cheap to discover. So for me, it was like, I need to get to a certain level of success and wealth to then be able to make a proper impact and invest and donate a lot of money. So I think it'll probably be some sort of charity or foundation focused on either the cancer I specifically had, like research in blood cancers, or specifically for teenagers, because obviously during my experience, I was lucky, I was in remission, but I've met a lot of other kids who, unfortunately, I've seen the news that they didn't quite make it. And, you know, it's really upsetting to see that kids or teenagers who have all these prospects in life ahead have their life taken from them because of something that they cannot necessarily control. Because, you know, as I say, I didn't know how I got it. These guys probably don't know how they've got it. It just happens sometimes. You don't know. And, you know, they don't even get the chance to actually have a go at life, because really when you're a teenager, you've not really done an awful lot in life. You don't really had that chance to go and make some sort of impact. So I want to start something that, you know I need to get to a level of wealth where I can actually make an impact, and something that's related to cancer research, or something around trying to find a cure for different types of cancers, or more support for teens going through it. But that's the end goal of like sort of like my more philanthropy side.
So coming out the other side of that, thankfully in remission, how did your perspective, your worldview, your ambitions, everything you want to achieve, how did it all change? Because I can imagine going through an experience like that feels a bit like a second chance. It's something I've experienced with my own background as well. And I know how my worldview and perspective changed coming out the back of my negative experience with my mental health. Whereas for you, you've essentially gone through a treatment where you didn't know what the outcome was going to be and had to live through that with your friends and family nearby at an age where the resources and the understanding is not quite where I think we conventionally understand cancer to be. I think that the general perspective in society is that it's something that can catch up with you in middle age and beyond.
Yeah.
So you must have felt quite isolated, alone, unique, and that must have made the emotional processing of the whole thing even more difficult. So how did you view the world when you came out?
For sure. I mean, just on the point you made, like, I never thought cancer was something that a teenager could get. I didn't know anyone who was young who had ever got it. I always thought that it's something you probably get when you're older based on the way that you've lived in your lifestyle. So it was a very lonely and isolating experience. My worldview started shifting during the treatment as opposed to right after. So I think I tell this story a lot, but the cancer that I had was an 85% chance of curing first time. So the odds are relatively in my favor for my age group. The way I was responding to it from the first 4 weeks, it was 85% chance of getting into remission first time. But there is always that like voice in the back of your head. It's like, what if you are that 15%? You know, I was probably in a very like pessimistic environment at the time because of what I was going through. I was very negative. So it's like, what if I am that 15%? And I think it was during the treatment in June, that it started really shifting in my mind for me. I'd always known, like, as I say, since I started this online entrepreneurship journey when I was 13, that I wanted to achieve some sort of success with it. But it was always much more of a long-term play. And this treatment really shifted my perspective in the stance of I had to do something and take action right away because life could potentially be very, very short. You know, I never thought that at the age of 16, I could potentially be facing mortality. And that really changed the perspective of, all right, I could literally go out tomorrow and potentially die. I could get hit by a bus, or I could get cancer, or whatever. And I was like, right, that means that there is generally no time to waste. I have to take action with my life right now. If I want to achieve some sort of level of success, leave some sort of legacy, make some sort of impact, I have to do something right away and follow my ambitions. And as I say, since I started in the online space and started learning about online entrepreneurship, building a couple of businesses, that's the route I wanted to go down. And I wanted to be successful in that route. So I started right away. Instead of, you know, I was thinking I was going to go down uni and then go into the corporate world for a bit and then start a business once I had the credibility and resources. But I was like, I can't do this. I potentially might die now. So I basically started the business straight away out of, whilst I was going through chemo actually. So it was in July. So the sort of shift happened in June, started the business in July. And then coming out of that, it made me just realize that I have to take every opportunity and not dwell on things. I mean, I've become more, I started saying yes to a lot more things. Obviously now I think I've scaled it back and now say no to a lot more things because of just how life goes and how time goes. But at the time it was like, I can't like waste time with things. If there's an opportunity presents itself that could be interesting for me, I have to take action right away on these sort of things. So that was where my perspective shifted.
And you were 18 at this point,
No,
you?
I was 17 when
17 at that point, and the business you started then, was that Saulderson?
Yeah, Saulderson I started when I was 17, yeah.
Yeah, and that is the business that is still growing now.
Yeah.
So I think that the real takeaway there is just how much perspective came from being faced with a challenge to a slower outlook on life, because essentially the question you could frame this as is, if you go to bed tonight, would you be happy with this being the last day? What if you didn't wake up tomorrow?
Yep.
I think 99.9% of people in day-to-day Western world's answer would probably be no.
No, yep.
Which is terrifying. But then actually, if you go over to more rural existences, maybe more impoverished existences in rural Vietnam, whatever it might be, the answer is probably yes.
Yep.
Which makes you wonder, well, what are the environmental influences that make us feel the way that we do? And how do we communicate to people to reframe their perspective on things without having to go through a traumatic experience? Because I can very much empathize with you've got a second chance at this, just go all in, take action, say yes to everything, and be patient with things, but don't have any faith that tomorrow will come and give you the opportunity if you can do it right now. Yeah. And that's kind of the perspective I've come out the back of my suicide attempt with, whereby I reflect on everything that's happened between then and now and think of all the times I've laughed, the people I've met, the things I've enjoyed, and that was almost not the case. Yep. So the gratefulness that comes with those experiences is augmented, which means that it forces me to constantly consider my place in the world and what place I want that to be.
Yeah, gratitude is a big one, I think, that came out of it. I think you definitely start to appreciate the experiences and world and what you've been able to go through, because again, you know, it's very similar to you. I'm looking back, if I was at 15% and I didn't make it out, all the stuff that I've experienced since, I'm even more grateful for, because I've had that second chance at life.
So getting into influence marketing, Saulderson, I think the first question for those listening, because it's a newer pillar of marketing, but very much one of the fastest growing and most effective within the modern world. But I'd say there's a lot of confusion around it.
Yeah,
I fall into that category in many ways. You run a business that is the middleman for a lot of it. So do you want to clear up any confusion on influencer marketing? What do people need to know about it? And what do you think people often get wrong with their understanding of influencer marketing?
Yeah, okay. So really the fundamental, if you want to strip it back to very layman terms, influencer marketing is essentially where a brand promotes their product with influencers as a sort of like an advertising medium, right? If anyone knows what, like, you know, if anyone's seen a Facebook or an Instagram or a YouTube ad, instead of advertising using paid media, you're essentially using your influencers as that paid media. Is virtually as simple as that. But the reason why influencer marketing is so powerful, and the reason why people use it so much, is because generally the Gen Z and the millennial age group have grown up with social media, grown up with phones, and have been attached to these and seeing these sort of public figures online. Traditionally, celebrity marketing was a very, very big thing because, I know my parents' generation, they grew up watching TV or seeing celebrities, and the brand association with them was the most important thing. But now brands are trying to associate with the people that we trust, that we watch, and that influence us. So utilizing influencers is the perfect route for that, because we already trust those people. We feel like that level of relatability to them, because anyone really can become an influencer, especially with the rise of TikTok, where it's very fast now to grow. I could, probably not me, because I don't feel I have that level, but anyone really could start a TikTok channel and over the next month grow that very effectively, and then they're deemed an influencer. And it's not like you have to be born into any sort of route. For example, a lot of celebrities were born into wealth or whatever, or are born into celebrity fandom. Influencer, you can just become that. So it's a level of relatability. So younger people associate more with them, they relate to them more, and also they take a lot of their worldviews, opinions, and considerations of what they want to purchase from the people they follow online, because as I say, they just associate with them. So brands need to position themselves with these creators to then reach that target audience, because they've already built that trust, and they don't have to hit that audience with as many touch points as they might have had to do previously. If I don't know a brand and I go and look at a magazine ad or a banner, I'm probably not going to purchase the them, because it's just there. But if it's with an influencer that I already know and trust, you've almost broken that fourth wall with the brand. So that's the main sort of reason it's become so successful, and brands are advocating it and using it a lot more, because it's the perfect way to connect with this Gen Z and millennial audience.
And in simple terms, it's no different to traditional marketing, where the aim of traditional marketing is to get new potential customers in front of the thing you are trying to make them aware of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the influencer is literally just, you can just replace influencer with anything. You can replace
the
it with
Super Bowl,
yeah, exactly.
For example.
Super Bowl, it's whatever medium you're using to advertise a product is the marketing asset, and the influencer is just that medium, essentially.
I think there's a lot of inherent cynicism in probably our parents' generation that don't necessarily, maybe those a little bit younger than that don't necessarily view it in as simple terms as I try to, and I'm sure that you do, which is marketing channel is created. That is people that are interested in the focus point of that marketing channel, and there are brands that align with that the person uses.
Yep.
So therefore it makes sense to show it to that wider audience, which
Exactly.
is essentially just the same mechanism as any form of traditional marketing, which is how can we reach our target audience and make them aware that we exist? What is the mechanism to do that? In your case, influence is the mechanism, but traditionally it's been celebrities, it's been athletes, it's been billboards, it's been magazine ads. So it's no different to traditional marketing. I think it's just something that's worth clearing up, because I think
a lot of people overcomplicate
yeah.
it, because they just are like, influencer, what's that? Like, what? Because especially like I think it's just the generations above us, because they're not as social media in tune with us social media as much as us.
Not in a critical way, because I think it's important. It's something that's new and has developed quickly, hasn't it? And I mean, I'm not massively older than you are, but there's people that are sort of my age and slightly above that are really anti-social media, because it kind of came at a point where it's new, and if you didn't get involved, then you kind of just distanced yourself and stayed away from it. But I think it's authenticity is the buzzword that I think I really want to throw out there, because the only value I see in people online that fall into this category is if they are authentic. Otherwise, the whole thing falls flat on its face, and it just becomes a transactional. You have this many eyes on you. We have a product. Let's pay to sell, which is no different to a Facebook ad in my mind. That you're not accessing the sort of fourth wall element that you mentioned.
There's no extra sort of value add at that point, because fundamentally paid ads, Facebook ads, if you do them right, will end up being cheaper than influencer ads. It's just the way that it is, because you're just running it through a Facebook advertising mechanism. Whereas if you're running it with influencers, it's a real person. You're buying into their, own persona, their time, their editing, their creative. So it's going to be more expensive generally. So, and if that creator doesn't have like a sort of authentic connection with their audience, then you're not really getting the additional value add. But some brands are just viewing it now a lot more as just simply just a performance mechanism, similar to Facebook ads. They don't really care about the creator, the connection of the audience. If that creator can generate and sell for them, then they don't really care an awful lot about that. But authenticity is generally one of the main things you have to have for that to happen anyway. There's some extreme cases where it's not. You know, there's some extreme cases where, for example, it might be a channel that's not based around a person or a personality, not building that trust and that connection, and that just sells very well for a specific brand. But generally it is the authenticity of a creator, and they're only going to be promoting products that they truly believe in. Their audience knows that, and then that's like, okay, they're not just shilling something bad at me. I want to buy it. And de-influencing, I don't know if you've seen that, has become a bit of a buzzword at the moment, of like influencers sharing firstly products that they don't like and being authentic around that, and being very open about that. But then also influencers that are viewed as non-authentic as well, who do a bunch of promotions, are actually having a much more negative impact on brands. So it's a very interesting space. You really got to do it right, otherwise you don't see an awful lot. You just end up spending a lot of money and achieving very, very little back.
It's something that's very important to me, hence why for anyone listening that's kind of wanting a bit of an insight into the ecosystem from my end, is that's why, generally speaking, I'll only really do long-term relationships, because I can build in the wetsuits that I wear 3 times a week to the narrative of the training that I'm doing with the brand that I was wearing anyway, but then we can almost sync up to magnify the effort of the video being created, or just make the process easier so that more eyes that are relevant to the product are seeing the things that I bought into in the first place, which is why authenticity is something that I hold very, very valuably to me, because it's integrity at the end of the day. It's only working with people you like to work with, and that goes beyond marketing. That's kind of how to do it on a day-to-day basis.
I think the creators that are doing it best are the ones that are shifting more to longer term arrangements with brands, and maybe are shifting less from, I think up until a certain point, when you're first starting out small, you need to obviously be making income. So creators are just trying to bring everything on board. But when they get to a certain size and they can command more from a brand, they can command more respect, they're obviously more picky, want to work into brands that they're already bought into, these longer term relationships. But I think a lot of creators now are moving more towards realizing, right, if I can work with a brand long term and actually help grow them, this is going to have much more long term benefit for me. So there's equity deals coming out now where creators are getting equity in a brand, in a company, or even so more creators, instead of promoting a brand, are actually realizing, right, what's authentic to me if I just launch my own thing and I'll promote that as much as I want. It belongs to me. I'll be using it anyway. And that's really obviously growing a lot within the creator economy at the moment as well.
Which is fascinating. Anyway, that's enough on that in terms of context, but I just wanted to get out of the way because I do think there is an inherent cynicism that I think for those listening, I'd encourage you to be a little bit more open-minded to, with all that in mind, hopefully, because it's a massive, massive industry and you are really right in the thick of it with Saulderson. So do you want to talk us through the journey from 17 years old to now in terms of the business growth and what the biggest challenges have been along the way, along with the sort of real focus points of the business that you want to share?
Yeah. So we started in July 2018, just me, myself, and the idea was that I just started managing a few content creators that I was working with back at ESL. So I left ESL, and ESL was an MCN at the time. So basically these partner channels could technically still partner with me and be managed by me. It was a different sort of relationship. So I was able to bring them over, and all I was doing at this point was managing their emails. Brand was reaching out to them, and then I would just negotiate with the brand on a rate that the creator wanted and take a percentage and handle that sort of process, so the creator didn't have to. It was almost just an idea of letting the creator create. I'd handle the business, the back end.
It's just traditional broker model.
Traditional, yeah. And then during that process, I had a brand that came to me and essentially did it with my creators. And was like, do you have any more creators that you can work with us with? And I didn't at that point. And then I realized, and they were like, Brian, well, can we just give you like 10K and can you just spend this with creators because you've done it well with these ones? And then I started looking into it more and realized the majority of the money in the space, unless you had managed or you were managing some of the top pinnacle creators, the majority of money in the space really is working and servicing for the brands, because they're the ones that at the end of the day hold the budget, up until obviously you get to your large scale creators. So shifted the agency at the time into both talent management, so we're still managing these creators and working for them essentially, and then working for brands and handling their marketing spend. So the idea was that they would come with a certain marketing spend, we would work with them to develop a sort of strategy to spend that, utilizing influencers, whether that's a very simple case of they knew already what they wanted to do, or we had to come up with some sort of strategy to reach that audience. So started doing that over the first 6 months. The business started growing a lot quicker than I expected because, again, for me, it was just, I just had to do something right away from my journey, and I wanted to build this business, and it was taking my mind off what I was going through as well. Within 6 months, I think we turned over 100K, and then I was like, okay, this is where it really could possibly be something. We started receiving quite a bit of press as well, which helped with our growth and our journey. So I brought in a member of the team, and just myself and him were just building and growing. And a majority of the time at that point, it was just managing talent and then getting these small campaigns from these brands and trying to help them plan their budget and spend that across. And then over the years, I think we've been running for just under 5 years now. It'll be 5 years in July. So we've grown pretty well since then. We've had, I think, I'll be honest, we've had last year we didn't grow to our targets we want to. We actually plateaued a little bit. And I take personal responsibility for that because I was more so focused on like my personal life and just wanted to travel and whatever. And this year I'm kind of taking much more focus, but we've grown still pretty well since that first zero. And this year looking to do about 2.5 million GBP in turnover. Main focus of the business, we still have the talent management side, that's still growing and that's still building. It wasn't really a main focus for me, and it still isn't necessarily, but I think it's a very interesting space because the talent we have, a lot of them are absolutely amazing, some extremely talented creators in there, but also, just looking at the way the career economy is going, long-term potential with working and building potential brands with creators is massive. If you can find yourself a creator who can build you the next, Prime or the next Mr. Beast brand or whatever, there's a lot of long-term potential there. It's also a great asset to hold as a business. These creators that are signed for you for long-term. And I also want to stay like true to my roots. So that's the area I started in. That's the area I was passionate about, helping content creators. So we still kind of are building that and growing, but my main focus is on the agency side of the business. And that's really just working with clients to help them, as I say, they sort of the similar thing, but much larger budgets now, much more in-depth strategies, and we're launching a few different things. So looking to launch, say, a creator economy brand, a few other services within that. We have around 11 people in total in the team at the moment. That, as I say, we've been growing and building from there. And yeah, that's the kind of main area. We've worked with clients like Asus, or probably one of the biggest names of the tech company. We've done probably high 6 figures now in sort of campaigns run with them over the time. Help them build out their TikTok to start with, which Ed was actually was hired around that time to come on with.
Who now works with me.
Yeah, which is quite funny. So we've done stuff with Asus, Acer, AB InBev, which is like the world's biggest beer company. Yeah. We helped them do their sort of esports strategy last year. So some really incredible names that I think it's like, wow, like a 22-year-old guy from Scotland is like handling, budgets, large scale briefs and budgets that for huge, like multi-billion brands. And we've worked with some really cool creators. So we have some pretty awesome talent side. We've got the biggest Photoshop creator that Ed brought in actually, and Ed still works with, called Benny, who's really talented. We've worked with other creators non-exclusively as well. So I've worked with basically all the sidemen, know all the sidemen guys, the Beta Squad, some of the guys from Logan Paul's team and whatnot. So it's pretty cool, and we put on a lot of interesting activations. Some have gone massively successfully, obviously some not. You have your both, but we've had a lot of data, a lot of learning, and just trying to continually improve the service. A lot of brands, as I say, are shifting more performance based, so that's the challenge this year. Is more brands are being like, okay, we don't really care about the viewership or the impressions or how good this is going to look for our brands. We're solely based on what performances it's going to bring. So a lot of our strategy at the moment is having to shift to be much more efficient with the spend that we're doing on campaigns to really have that attributable sales performance come back.
Which is probably reflective of the wider economy
worldwide. It's virtually, since the kind of macroeconomic stance of the world, that's been the way that the market's going. I'm seeing very few campaigns across other agencies as well, because I talk to a lot of the other agency founders because we all keep up with each other. That's one good thing about this space, is that whilst you're very competitive, you can collaborate a lot because everyone has access to different brands and different creators, and there's a lot of collaborative opportunity. But that's the way that a lot of people's campaigns are going. It's everyone is just solely focused on performance right now, because when situations like this happen, the first thing that usually gets cut is marketing. So if they are going to be cutting that, the marketing they are doing is going to be focused on simply just sales and acquisition. So that's the main thing right now. But it's proving interesting for some brands, but it's a good challenge because we're really team are really learning a lot about data and how to actually get performance from the advertising.
So at what point did the dream to become a doctor die?
I think it was probably around the time that I got the job at ESL, because before that, everything I'd done, I think over the 3 years prior, I think I'd made a total of about $2,500 online. So it wasn't like, if you do the maths on that compared to an hourly salary,
Which your parents had good experience with in terms of hours worked versus salary netted,
Yes.
didn't they? Yeah.
Exactly. That was very, very low. I mean, I didn't ever tell them about it, but that was just, if I was doing the maths against it, it was like, there's no way I can survive on $2,500 every 3 years, realistically. So it wasn't, at that point, I was still like just doing it as a passion and a hobby, just trying to make what I could. When I got the job at ESL, and I had, obviously I was getting the €800 in every month, and obviously the projections that we set with the team of, you'll finish your school and work for a sort of on this freelance part-time role, and then come and work and kind of live in Germany and work from the HQ. That was when I was really like, okay, I'm going to go down this path now, because even if I don't have success in a business in this path, I'll still work in the corporate space within, I guess, the marketing and esports world, and still work for a very large, because ESL is the biggest company, still work for a very large firm, build out my experience and become a big name in this space, and then maybe go into starting my business again in the future. So I think it was around that time, like early 2018.
Did you feel like you were letting your parents down at all?
Not really, to be honest. Because again, I hadn't necessarily, I mean, to me personally, I don't think it was, because I hadn't really told them, I hadn't really processed at that time. Maybe if I had the discussion and they looked upset, or they thought they looked that they were let down potentially, but at that point I hadn't really thought about their, how they would view it. And then it was only until later when I got ill and I started seeing a bit of success with Saulderson, when I had a discussion with them about it. And at that point they were very open to what I was interested in. It was obviously, when I got ill, I think their mindset as well shifted a lot on like my life and what I wanted to do, and my prospects and that conversation. They were even the ones, I remember when I was applying for uni in that time period when I was ill, and when I started seeing this little bit of success with Saulderson, because I told them about it when I started it, because I mean I was building the website in the chemo ward. My mum was always with me and she would see what I was doing, and when I told them about sort of the revenue we were bringing at that point, and I'm really interested in this business, they were completely supportive, which was a massive change from before. And I think it was definitely what I went through, that they were like, right, let's be more open to kind of other opportunities, because the life is potentially this short, and maybe he doesn't want to do this. And they didn't actually, they were like, do you want to go to uni? Like, you don't necessarily have to. It was me that still went to university, obviously very different route. And also my brother is older than me. He didn't go on to do medicine. He went on to do economics and stuff. So I think they were already like away from the doctor thing. It was just, as long as I was doing something that would have good prospects for me in the future, and I was going to have sustainable and good income and be able to provide for a family in the future.
I think the real key point there is that you built a viable alternative in the background because you enjoyed doing so.
Yep.
And didn't spend too much time pondering and thinking on ideas with those around you that might have negatives to share or might have alternative routes to offer you. Because I think when it comes to people starting their own businesses, they fall into that trap where they spend far much time thinking and conferring with those around them that will obviously have, they'll bring up risk, they'll bring up this, they'll bring up that, and it might make you a little bit less excited about it. But if you can find something you're passionate about and build it to the point where it accidentally becomes a career, which for you it became, then it means that you have a viable solution to then sort of work with the people around you, create a support network so that you can be the best version of yourself moving forwards. Because there's an element of selfishness to the way you've had to exist now, I'd imagine. 11 staff members, different time zones, lots going on. And that selfishness probably comes at a cost to your personal life in some way for the age that you are, I would imagine. So do you feel being a few years ahead in terms of the standard evolution of entrepreneurialism, career path in general? How harsh do you think the compromise has been on your personal life, or do you think it's all been beneficial?
I think it's probably majority been beneficial, realistically looking at it, but I think there has been a lot of negativity and negative things that have come from it, because if I look at all my peers from school or university, I should still be in university right now. I just dropped a year. I would still be my fourth year right now. So all of my friends who are in sort of a more traditional route are still there, still doing this very sort of carefree uni life. And I'm looking at me with all these pent up responsibilities and mental sort of baggage that I have. And whilst I have, I'm way ahead of them comparatively in terms of career, monetary, I guess, consciousness and intelligence and in different areas, and kind of real world, skills and abilities. It's fantastic. Loads of opportunity there. And if I ever needed to go into any sort of specific route, I have like this massive wealth of experience behind me. But in terms of the ability to just live a life where I don't have to really, I'm comfortable, I don't have to care about anything. I can just enjoy my time, social, uni. I don't have these responsibilities. I said this. I was doing a TED talk last week, and I said this one thing that was like, myself and many other young entrepreneurs have obviously had to bear a lot of responsibility and liabilities that you wouldn't expect a 22-year-old to face. Like, I'm now responsible for not just my life, but the lives of many other people. I've got family members I have to take care of. I have clients that rely on me, and if I mess up for them, then there's negative impacts on their livelihoods, their business. And the probably one that's even the most difficult to think about is staff members, right? If I mess up, it doesn't just affect me. They rely on me for their survival, their livelihood to meet their bills every month. And if I mess up and one of them has to be let go or something, that's I have to think about them as well. So it's a lot of it's very taxing mentally. There's a lot of emotional baggage I think that's come with it. Definitely a lot of like different traumatic points in the experience of self-doubt. There's been bad times. No one has a perfect ride in business. Anyone that's Amazon or Tesla have probably had times where they were almost bust. No one ever has any 100% good times. So there's been very rough times. There's been times where we've had not hit our goals, we've lost lots of money, and we've not turned over XYZ. And comes with a whole load of self-doubt as well. I was like, am I really cut out for this? Can I really have success in this? Because fundamentally, like, I've done well, but I'm nowhere near what I would need to ever be to be like, I can relax now, I'm fine. So I still have to constantly continue working and thinking, and I'm still a startup at the end of the day, and I've not really made it yet. So there is still always that self-doubt of like, if I fail now, am I cut out for this path?
Is your identity wrapped up in the performance of the business?
I think so, for sure. I think because I think another negative part and a positive part, you get into all these circles of very interesting people who've become successful young, or you get access to different people who are older, mentors, whatever. And then I obviously then start comparing myself to these people who maybe have completely made it, or they're young and they're ahead of me at this specific standpoint. So then I start comparing myself to them, and I'm like, I need to get like that to be able to sort of stand in my own 2 feet in these networks. And then my identity then gets wrapped up into where I have to have this business perform and keep growing and keep getting better if I want to, I guess be compared to these people, or will they even like respect me if I can't get to that stage that these people are at. I've definitely got wrapped into that sort of cycle of just needing to keep on getting better and perform as a business owner.
What is it that's driving you to do that? Is it ego? Is it proving to yourself that you can be who you wanted to be coming out of a negative experience with chemotherapy and remission? Is it to impress others? Is it to impress your parents? What at your core is driving you forwards?
I think there's definitely a few things. Like I'll always admit, like to everyone, like I'm definitely pretty materialistic. These things drive me. Like if I see someone driving a nice car, I want that car. How can I get to that? I'm materialistic. I want to have this image of being wealthy, successful, being able to do what I want when I want, have be able to drive these fast cars. But part of it is almost like to me to just like prove to myself, but also to anyone that ever doubted me that like I can make it in whatever way. Because when I started off, when I was in the early parts, like when I was doing YouTube, making this cringy content, you get picked on at school because it's non-conventional. You're going away from the status quo. And to be honest, like I'm looking back, I would have picked on myself. It's cringe. But like people always doubt you at the start of your journey. And I had a lot of people doubting me as if I would ever go anywhere, even close friends who were like, it's not necessarily going anywhere. I didn't believe in it, or didn't know what I was really doing. So it's proving as well to other people, I think, of like, nothing can stop me, and I'm going to get to this success level. And obviously, a part of it is proving to myself as well that I am a capable individual to get to this. I think I have wrapped myself up into the space of just needing to be like a very high performance individual across every area. Like business is obviously the first area that goes into, but I need to be high performance in other points. I don't know, that's just a big driver of me, that I want to be one of these individuals that is very capable, and now I need to do that, and there's nothing can really stop me to get there.
Thank you for sharing all that, because there's a lot of people that keep some elements of that probably closest to their chest, in the sense that they wouldn't outwardly say, yes, I'm materialistic, because there's almost a stigma attached to saying such things, which I applaud you for owning, because it makes it a much more transactional process, whereby this is how I deem success personally. That doesn't mean it's the right way, but this is what
it may not be the right way, because I was talking to someone about this. It may not necessarily be the right way, and it might be actually negative in some aspects, but I think it's important to be self-aware of it and be open and honest with yourself that this is the reasoning behind it.
So how sustainable is it, do you think? Because hedonistic adaptation is a thing.
Yeah.
There's always a faster car. There's always a bigger house. There's always a bigger boat. Monaco exists.
Yeah, I've been in it. It definitely exists.
There's all these things that are a lot further along the ladder, further up the steps, and you're only 22 at the moment. You've already ticked off a lot of these things, which is phenomenal to have done so. But where do you actually draw happiness from on a day-to-day basis? Or are you always looking forward to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? Because surely that can't be sustainable long term, because there won't be a next thing. Or you might hit a point where actually your identity becomes so wrapped up in business growth that you stop yourself from even actually being able to consider who you are out with the business.
Yep.
And you get caught in this constant cycle of never actually allowing yourself to be happy, because you're always chasing a vision of happiness that doesn't actually exist.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree with you in the fact that you do end up continually just chasing the next mountain. But I always do think there is generally always another mountain to climb, whether that is like financial. At some point, you say obviously there's eventually becomes a cap, but I think at that point I will have learned enough about myself and had enough life experience to know there'll probably be another mountain on top of that may not be that. I just think that I am generally a person that just wants to keep doing something and achieving something. I think I would get bored if I got to the point where I completed everything, and I would get bored. And I don't think you can complete everything. There's always going to be something else, and I don't necessarily think I derive happiness from that. I think I derive my constant pursuit of something or sort of purpose from sort of achieving all these things. I mean, happiness, like, I don't know, I derive happiness just from like doing stuff that I feel fulfills me. So whether that is, right now it's obviously running a business and making money and making some sort of impact or whatever, but there is also, I do this sort of coaching group for young guys, and like that makes absolutely nothing. Like we don't really charge very much for it, but I derive happiness because I just I work with these guys and I see like the success they're having. So I don't necessarily think it is just wrapped up in this business performance thing for my happiness levels. I think it's just as long as I'm doing something that fulfills me and this towards my sort of goal and purpose, I will have happiness there. And I mean, I still hang out with my friends and do all that stuff, the standard 22-year-old stuff where I get my happiness from and whatnot. So
would you be less happy having a flat white with your friends at a cafe in Glasgow than you would having a flat white with your friends at a cafe in Monaco?
So I thought this for a while I'd want to be in a different place. And I've been traveling a lot recently because I had this idea. I got really bored during COVID, being in the one place. I just had to see the world and eventually discover where I liked. And I've seen some amazing places and love some amazing places, but I realized on this journey that it's not necessarily like where you are, it's like who you're with in the company. So as long as you are, like, for example, if I was with I know I could have a good time here in Glasgow with my mates, as long as you're in that right company and that right frame of mindset. It doesn't necessarily matter. Okay, could you potentially have more fun on, in Monaco on a yacht with whatever, the environment for sure, but I think it is definitely down to like who you're with and the company that you're surrounding you with. I've lived in Glasgow, and I know that some of the happy experiences I have are just having a good time with my closest mates from back home here, as opposed to potentially having, a good time or a mad time in somewhere like Dubai or whatever. I think it definitely just ties down to the people.
What is next? What are the low-hanging fruit goals for you at the moment?
So yeah, just kind of continual growth of Saulderson. There's a lot we want to do and achieve in terms of clients and new business. So we're putting in a few systems. So I'm starting a system over the next month, which is more so just around sort of the new business acquisition stuff, because I just want to really scale and grow the business. In terms of like next, I don't know how short term this is, but potential exit of the business at some point. I was already approached by a company last year, to a bigger agency in the space, about buying the company, and I went back and forth with them for a while. Ended up not going forward with it for a few different reasons. I'm glad I didn't now, actually, because that company has lost quite a lot of their clients this year. So my earnout would, and like stock, because I was getting a percentage earnout, a percentage of stock in the company would be lower now. It's probably kind
Good
of
decision.
so it's probably
Good
worked
decision.
out well. I mean, the projections of them were great, but it's just a few things that obviously the macroeconomic state as well has happened. So, but potentially exit the business. Like, I love influencer marketing. I love the space that we're in. I think it's amazing. I get to work with people that I've watched and idolized and find super cool, and get to be in these exciting environments and networks. But I think it's more like a stepping stone. I don't see myself being working with YouTubers all my life, to be honest. I think I will eventually exit that. I don't know whether that's in the next month, whether that's the next 5 years, but that's like on the journey. I'm also building a few things aside from that. So I'm building this coaching things. Again, that's not really like that's not something I'm deriving like monetary success out of. That's just seeing what value it can have, because I found it so fulfilling. There's a couple of guys that have come in there, and it started originally as like a business financial coaching type thing to help them start a business and scale. But we realized like a lot of the guys coming in there just didn't really have many life skills as such, and it became more so just about helping them build as an individual, as a man. So if I had guys coming in there who lack confidence, won't even speak to anyone out with their circles, have anxiety and all this, and it's just helping them, build those skills, build themselves as a man, to then eventually, I guess, get into that level of building that business and financial. So that, I think it's important to focus on your mindset and your confidence and your social skills first before you get into business, because you're gonna have a lot more success with business if you're sorted as a person before. Because how can you sit and go into a room and try and sell to a big client if you can't even go and talk to someone in a shop, right? There's all these elements, and I also think that for a lot of young people, especially with like the rise of internet money and being able to get money so quickly, a lot of when you were before in the past, you had to put in a lot of work and get yourself to become a very capable individual to make a lot of money. Now you can do it very, very simply just by getting lucky in crypto or an NFT or whatever. But the guys that do this, I don't even think are I don't know what the word is, but like I don't think they're capable of commanding that amount of money because they've not focused and built themselves. So it's that type of progress. I'm nowhere near perfect. I've got so much I got to build, and I'm learning from people that are way more experienced than me in a lot of different areas. But I'm finding that fulfilling. So building that with my business partner there, and we're gonna do a few like events and stuff as well with that program. Getting more into like other investments and property. So I've started a property thing up in St Andrews where we're renting to students and then doing Airbnb. So over the sort of coming months and years with what's going on in the market, as things sort of start taking a hit, potentially opportunities within that. And then maybe a more longer term thing after I exit the business, I've really had this idea of want to start like a brand, because I just feel like it's I don't know, to me it's like I'm having a physical product that I've either developed or innovated or made with a group of people that then has a real impact on people's lives, and people might actually have it in their houses or in their homes and they use on a daily basis, or whether it's a one-off thing or subscription based, whatever it is. I don't know, it just seems amazing to me that I'm obviously like physically impacting people's lives, because at the crux of it right now, all I'm doing is making rich brands richer, right? I'm not really doing anything that's massively impactful. So something like that, I think, is the next step after sort of what I'm doing right now. But really, it's just same as before, and but at a higher level, and trying to grow and build what we got right now, and keep up with what's going on in the market and the economy right now, and just basically,
survive to thrive, which everybody's doing in essence, aren't they? But what are the harshest lessons that you've learned over the past couple of years from a business and a personal point of view? Because I can imagine everything's been so fast paced since you were 17.
Yep.
Essentially 5 years of business, 5 years of personal development, with not much time to sort of stop along the way. And with that will come mistakes. With that will become relationships breaking down. With that will come maybe difficulty communicating with your family, not being as present as you'd like to be, maybe getting too intertwined with your identity in the business and lots of things like that. So where do you think you've made mistakes, and what have the lessons been in the past couple of years?
I think in terms of mistake-wise, I think I've had a lot of naivety when I started out in business, and I think most people do when they start a business, right? You're not really prepared. It's a very different beast. It's a very different world, and you can put trust in people, but people, it's business. It's a game, and people are doing stuff to obviously have the best potential output for them. So I put a lot of trust in people earlier on, or thought something was really good or too good to be true, and it turned out to be. And I think I've learned a lot from there, is that if something is too good to be true, it probably is. And also, don't get yourself too tied up with people that you don't fully understand and trust, because I have been burned by people that I thought I could trust, but I hadn't really gone through the vetting process and really understood if they were a person that was there for me or this. And so I think that's definitely one of the biggest things. I think presence is another thing that I've struggled with a lot, and taken, I've seen it over the last 5 years, is that even when I was out with friends or at a party or whatever it was when I was in school, I was always always switched on to work, always just thinking about what it was. I remember there was one night I was at a person's birthday party. I remember this one, and I got a notification on Discord, and it was for some deal that I was organizing, and I was and I think I was drunk at the time, but I was just because I was just so addicted to business and just always couldn't switch off. I was just trying to get business done while I was drunk. So I struggled being the present moment and really, feel like I'm there. But I've been learning that a lot recently. Is when I'm working, and when I'm not working, I shouldn't be thinking about it or looking at that, because it's harder to maintain relationships that way and really, create things that are less superficial, in my opinion, if you're not really present with people. I think family and the time with them has been a learning point as well, because there's most of the time when I'm working, I was saying to Ed, I'm very, very boring. When I'm working, I wake up and I start work at 10 a.m. Other than taking breaks for food and then going to the gym or running, I'm just working all day till I go to bed. Not really an awful lot. So I don't really talk to all that many people out with whether it's a work related thing, and I don't talk to my family as much, but I've realized the importance of that during the time. And you can't be drawn two way. Yes, you have to make sacrifices to have success in business, but there are some things you shouldn't be sacrificing. And again, this has come from the whole idea of tomorrow's not necessarily promised. So the time that you need to give to your family and close people is very important. And then I think as well I've learned is that not everything you see on social media is true. And I've learned that from being in the influencer space, but also just my own personal journey. And it came from you've heard him or seen him, Iman Gadzi. This guy has this, a massive flaunty lifestyle online, 22-year-old, 25 million, and everyone sees him as the perfect idealistic. And I was striving to be like that, even content style at some point. So I was trying to have this life, because I thought, hey, this guy had the perfect life. And then I've heard
smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot about his story in the past and battles with depression, anxiety. I think he had some sort of suicidal time as well. And I've learned that from my own journey, because people always say to me, your life looks perfect, because you only really share that on social media, but there are so many unseen, behind the scene truths. I could share travel content or whatever online, make it look like all I'm doing is having this great time traveling, but at the majority of the time, honestly, I'm glued to a computer screen just hustling and working, but people don't necessarily see that. So I've learned that, and I always thought when I was younger that I just idolized these Emans and Stevens and stuff. Thought, oh, these guys are mega successful, they probably don't have to work, do anything, they can just travel, hot girls around them, fast cars, whatever. But it's really not like that. That's a 1-2% of the process.
I said smoke and mirrors because it comes back to the authenticity point earlier. Is I just can't buy into that style of content or narrative where it seems to be sort of hyper playing on the insecurities of young men at the moment and trying to offer them a solution to a problem that he isn't the one to solve. But the perception is that it's all completely perfect at all times, which is why it can be frustrating trying to decipher what's available online for people that probably not much younger than yourself are trying to determine their stance in life. So it's a good point, because everybody's guilty of it. The person that has just had their first child that wants to make it seem like they're living this perfect family lifestyle, when in reality it's probably chaos at home.
Yep.
And that holiday that's going on, that's all smiles, they might be arguing because the kid's keeping them up all night. But we all have this perception of not showing any vulnerabilities.
It's because there's the whole culture online, obviously, and you've worked out and as a martyr, and like the martyr culture is like success sells, failure doesn't typically. So people only will want to show the successful, good parts of their life. In some cases, being vulnerable and showing parts does work. Like for example, I've seen like LinkedIn posts of people being vulnerable about obviously the tech layoffs and talking about that. But it's a pride element as well, I think, because it's actually quite difficult. I think just in the modern world that we live in, it's quite difficult for people to like really want to show the bad stuff that's happening. It's almost like it's I say it's a pride thing, that they feel like they're lesser if they have to come out and be vulnerable or something's not going well. Because I know a lot of people who have been affected by, for example, layoffs or being made redundant or whatever, and it's like they don't want to talk about that online because it makes them look as if they're not good at what they're doing.
I view it as dishonest, though, because you're essentially withholding the true version of yourself and presenting an ideal that cannot be attained to the outward world.
It is for sure dishonest, but a lot of people obviously are just, they don't want to be perceived as something that is negative.
I try and do my absolute best to be very honest about all the ebbs and flows of my life on a day-to-day basis. Again, within a afternoon's worth of filming on a YouTube video, or with a caption on Instagram that I've sat there and.
But I think it's different for you compared to most people, because obviously what you've been through. So you're obviously very aware of like the real problems that can occur in life. So you're obviously going to be very open, transparent. And a lot of your brand has come off of that. But for people who have not, as you say, experienced some sort of trauma and understand that you can be vulnerable and people are open to that, they want to just show this perfect dishonesty.
It's not frustrating, but it's unfortunate, because there's so many examples of that that being incorrect.
Yep.
Whereas there seems to be this tendency that people need to feel like they've hit rock bottom before they can sort of start to lay the strategies and the habits to build themselves back up. So with that in mind, given that you are self-aware off the back of your negative experience, given that you have high stresses, you have high responsibilities, you have the lessons that have come from naivety, as you said, as we all do when getting into something new, how do you manage the ebbs and flows psychologically? Are you open, honest, and vulnerable with your family, your friends? Is it still something you feel you need to keep close to you? Or are you comfortable working through things in your own head? Or are there any habits that you have that help you decompress and actually make a decision to move forwards?
I'm very comfortable working through like what's going on, but I will be open and transparent. But I mean, like when I come on podcasts or I do a talk, like I'm very honest. Like I told everyone before, I'm materialistic. I did a TED talk the other day, and the whole point of the TED talk was about the unseen truths behind entrepreneurship, and talking about, actually the negatives that have come from my experience and the stuff that I go through on a daily basis, the toughness, the struggle, the challenges. So I will be open and honest about it. If I'm doing a talk or a podcast or being asked about it, but I tend not to talk about it an awful lot, because I feel like I'm a person who can get through it pretty well, and that's just because of my resilience from my experiences in life. Because for me, it's like I've been knocked down to possibly one of the lowest points that I could have been. Like, you have yourself. So I feel like now anything that comes across in my life, I can manage it a lot easier, because I know that it just can't be worse than what I've already been through. So I will get through it. So I don't tend to stress an awful lot. I know I do feel stressed, but I don't tend to project it out into the world, because I know I can manage it internally myself. If people ask me or people talk to me, I will generally be honest about it, but I don't need to, I guess, manage it by putting it out there. I can manage it myself as much, but it's not like but I won't hide it.
Do you think things need to improve online? Because I personally think people need to be more honest and present the human behind the lens more.
No, for sure. I think especially in the Western world, for sure, I think we do need to be more honest online, because it's giving this, as I say, dishonest and false perception to people who are coming
it's creating an unattainable ideal, and I think that can be damaging for people that are looking for heroes in their day-to-day life.
Very, for sure. And as you say, if we're looking for heroes, but then it's obviously not actually that, and when they get to really know about who that hero is and what they've gone through and everything, then it's not quite the same as what they're portraying. So I think it does need to be more honest, because I think as well, like when things are honest, like again, it is much more relatable to everyone. People respect it as well. I've never seen anyone who has come out about something bad or been vulnerable and people have, obviously there's your internet trolls and haters or whatever, you're going to get that regardless, but who hasn't had people respect them more, relate to that, and be like, actually, I understand this a lot more, and now I can look at it, look at the lens and put it on my life and think, okay, this is how I should be living, or how I should do this, or why this is happening.
Yeah, I think it's something I'm very passionate about, but also I personally couldn't do it any other way. If I'm having a bad time, I'll be pretty open and honest about it with everyone around me, because I know that's the best way for me to find a way through it. But also pretending that I'm happy when actually I'm not, or pretending everything's great when it perhaps isn't, is much harder to do than it is to just be honest, in my opinion. But again, as you said, that comes from a self-awareness through a negative experience. But
yeah, and a lot of people unfortunately don't have that, so then they'll never realize that. And that's one thing I'm trying to do with like my story. I think is that's one of the things I was saying. Like I want people to rather people take action in their life instead of wait for something negative to happen that springs them to do it, because sometimes people are always just waiting for that to or they're not necessarily consciously waiting, just subconsciously they're waiting for something bad to happen, and then maybe it never happens, and then they regret it towards the end of life.
So with a clear self-awareness, with a clear desire to be a certain person in the future, if Saulderson didn't exist tomorrow, who would you be as a person?
I think I'd still be the same me, but just without the business. I think I'm trying to detach myself from like this business specifically. Like I would still be Suhit, who has managed to. Are you saying as if like Saulderson wasn't ever a thing, or if
it just disappeared tomorrow, what would what would your perception of your own identity be?
I mean, I think it would be the same. It's not just necessarily so. I mean, I have my other businesses. I would still be, Suhit, the entrepreneur who wants to succeed and build. And all it would be the case of is that if the industry got wiped out tomorrow, I would just take some time to reflect on, okay, what is the potential next opportunity, and just continue down that path. I think now I've got to this stage where it's like, I don't think I could see myself working for someone else unless it was, for example, a company I was very, very bought into and potentially was working as like entrepreneurial or somewhere up in the space. But I think it would just be the case of I would still be very entrepreneurial and would just want to build something else, whether or not that's Saulderson. But I'd probably take some time to just really think about what that next opportunity is. But I think I'd be the same. I don't think I'm necessarily tied to this one business specifically. Business and entrepreneurship as a whole I'm very tied to, but this one business is not like me solo. Yeah, people see me as like that guy in influencer marketing, but I'm also trying to do more just around like young entrepreneurship as opposed to just the influencer marketing guy, if that makes sense.
I think it's the healthiest way to go, and it's positive to hear that, because I think this is the trap that a lot of athletes fall into, a lot of long-standing employees within big businesses fall into, where that identity becomes a bit wrapped in what they do on a day-to-day basis rather than who they truly are. So I think it's just a question that's worth reflecting on.
That's really interesting you say that, because my mum's like retired recently, and she literally, like, I was talking to her the other day and she was like, I feel a bit lost. And I was like, why? She's like, she's been in the same place 27 years of her life, and just like, I just don't really know like who I am anymore, because that was me. I was this like senior partner. 27
years of habitual existence that you have to work backwards from.
Yeah, because
she's going to happen overnight.
Because I thought, life's going to be so great, like you can just completely do everything you wanted to do, but she is just feeling like very like lost in terms of like what am I really here to do? Like, because her whole like life and journey and purpose was to be a doctor and look after people, and now she's like, that's all gone. So what is her identity? So it's very interesting you mentioned that, because I'm seeing that obviously in my own my own family. But I think obviously, as I say, I'm not necessarily so tied to Saulderson as a one. I think if all my entrepreneurship was to go tomorrow, then it might be something where it's like I have to like rethink and realign like my identity and what I'm trying to do. But Saulderson as a one, I don't think would cause that.
That's positive to hear, and I think it's something I constantly reflect on as well. Is who am I as a person? Who do I want to be? And how do I fit what I do on a daily basis into that definition, rather than the other way around, which I think is the easier trap to fall into. And then all of a sudden you have a small change in your life and you feel like you're in a tailspin, which is difficult to get out of. So thank you very much. That's been a very interesting conversation. Where's the best place for people to find you?
Probably on Instagram, just at Suhit Amin over there, or any other social platforms at Suhit Amin. It's a lucky point of having a very uncommon name. So yeah, just find me over there probably.
Fantastic. Thank you again, and speak very soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.